Hello and welcome. Here I will be talking about a 3D model I made of Darth Vader with paper nearly 4 years ago. And the video where I made this model was actually my first video on YouTube. So if you want to watch that jumbled assortment of clips over copyrighted music, there's a card up here or something. As a part of a look back on all I've done before the next phase of things, I will be looking at every single paper model I've made on this channel, and I am starting with the one who began everything, Darth Vader. Well, that about sums it up. So this model hasn't really held up over time. It's very flawed. But as you can see here, like all my models, this one can be broken down into many different sections, since everything connects basically by having one tube of paper slide within another. Paper Vader deconstructs into 26 pieces and the lightsaber. We have 3 for the cape, 4 bits for each arm, 2 for the torso, 3 for the hips, 4 for the head, and 3 parts to each leg. And all of my current models are broken down similarly to this, usually into about 16-ish pieces. But the first key difference is the way the arms and legs break down. The current way is pretty straightforward. The shoulder levers slide out of the torso, then the elbow lever out of the upper arm, and the wrist lever out of the forearm. But I used to overly complicate it. I had this idea in my head that the arms needed to be locked in place so they couldn't slide out. So I used to actually glue a little ring or stopper above the lever of the elbow and the thighs, so when it slides down that tube of paper in the upper arm or the upper thigh, the ring would stop it. Turns out it isn't really needed because gravity isn't bothered by 3 grams and these things would hold in place by themselves. But then with Vader, I still made his forearm removable anyway at a different point because I needed that for that ending animation. Ridiculous. My current method already achieves this with 1 less piece of paper and a stronger structure. I did the same for the thighs too, where I locked the tubes in the thigh where it swivels, but then went to the extra effort of making the calf removable below the knee joint, instead of just not bothering to lock in the joint at the thigh so it could simply slide out there, which would have made more sense and been more efficient, but, you know, rookies. These little cables and mechanical details I included in those tubes are nice though. Also, you can see that the line work and coloring didn't really hold up in those areas that swiveled. Pretty wonky. Another difference is I made up the hip levers extra short so I could fit both in next to each other at the hips, but this reduced length meant they fell out easily, which is why I now make one hip lever thinner with the second lever wrapping around that. This creates more stable articulation. I think the even bigger difference though between now and then is that I didn't use structure pieces back then. These simple parts that are used to define the form of each shape from 2 dimensions at a time, making it so I can get the 3D shape solid and the shape exact down to the millimeter. Anyway, Vader doesn't have those, which is in part why his helmet is so crap. What I used to do to fill in the mass between the frame and the surface of the model was to make it feel solid was I just stuffed it with more paper. I used a lot more paper than necessary, and I also used more on the joints too. Like this here was legit several page lengths of paper coiled as tightly as possible into the tube for his hip. And you know what that did? It made it really heavy, and is the primary reason my models couldn't stand up. What I'd do differently? All of it. I seriously think I could do better in every area on this model. It's nearly 4 years old after all. Although the buttons and chest details as well as the belt are still pretty good. And in fact, these parts on the belt are probably good enough to use today even. They have a little pin and pivot on the back of them so they can rotate slightly too. That's a cool touch. The belt itself, however, is on this strange ring joint that goes around the waist lever. Just seems like more work for nothing. Overall though, I think you can really see that back then I struggled to color dark objects. Especially Vader, who is mostly black, and the depth and shape of him comes from how the light reflects off of him. Here's the drawing I based the model off, and the model is pretty accurate to the drawing actually, but you can see in the drawing I didn't understand how to make things look shiny with my coloring back then. The problems with the model are there in the drawing too. Like, look at the boots here, they're just a mess. I think I was attempting to illustrate light reflecting off of the shiny boots, but it just looks like blobs. I mean, compare this drawing to one I did more recently of Vader, and you can see the difference. My understanding of shading to indicate 3D form is much improved, and this, to me, is what Darth Vader looks like. Oh, and something else I do differently now is the helmet. Back then, I thought it would be cool to have the helmet be removable to reveal the old Anakin Skywalker face underneath. A cool feature, sure, but ultimately it was something I would never show off, and making the helmet removable compromised the structure and shape of the whole head, because none of it could be attached directly to the head, so it had to be done in this roundabout, fickle way that's just annoying. Shortcuts. What shortcuts did I take on the model? Just about everything was as good as I could possibly do it at the time. I also remember taking a shortcut with the cape. It was meant to be 3 sections with the 2 sides and the back, but the back part was just never attached. Stuff it, I guess. Articulation. Okay, so for the articulation, he has a neck joint and a double joint in the head that allows for 1, 2, 3, 4 points of movement. The shoulder rotates all the way around, extends out, swivels unconvincingly at the upper arm, bends at the elbow, twists and bends at the wrist. It's just a T-joint. He even has some thumb movement with a 3-finger index finger split, which is pretty cool. Waist joint is a T-joint, so it bends and rotates within the hips. The belt flaps, but not really when his body actually slots into the hips, so that's still stupid. The leg joints are all pretty standard and consistent with what I do today. Oh, and his hip capes actually have their own joint each to bend out and rotate, which is a cool touch. I like that. So the range of motion and amount of joints in this model is as good as anything I would do today. It's just that they're all a bit loose. So that means Darth Vader cannot stand unsupported. Okay, so for key measurements and statistics and stuff, he weighs 66 grams. Fitting. He's 25.5 centimeters tall, which is about 3 millimeters too tall, as 202 centimeters divided by 8 for my 1 to 8 scale is only 25.25. Maybe that's a bit pedantic. And I'm not going to worry about any other key measurements, as I really wasn't that precise back then, and they all wouldn't be up to my current standards anyway. For now though, here he is compared to SH Figure Arts Vegeta, who I think is like a standard size action figure, who stands at 13.2 centimeters tall to the top of his face and 16 centimeters at the head. Here is the Broly, who is 19 centimeters tall at the top of the face and about 23.5 centimeters tall at the highest spike. Yeah, my paper models are notably larger than your standard plastic ones. In conclusion, he doesn't really hold up to today's standards anymore, but at the time, he was by far the best and most complex thing I had done, and he did stand initially when I had finished him. It's just over time, the joints loosened, so what are you gonna do? He is pretty accurate to my drawing, which is the best I can expect, because these 3D models are just 3D drawings after all. And Vader did push my techniques and skills further than anything that came before, with many of those techniques being almost applied to perfection in the very next model I made. Well, by 2016 standards at least. Thank you for your time and attention as always, and tune in next time to see how my Superman paper model holds up now in 2020. Dun, 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 dun. Click over here for my other videos. Dun, 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 dun. Damn it.